The world appears to be dividing before our very eyes. On the one hand, Europe is cancelling elections and outlawing political parties whenever their own hard left governments aren't winning. Canada and Australia have actually voted for hard left governments, and meanwhile, the US is making a last ditch bid for a return to freedom and smaller government. And the piggy in the middle appears to be the UK, where the jury is still out. We are watching the English-speaking world divide before our eyes, and Europe kind of coming along for the ride. The United States has gone towards freedom under President Trump, slashing government spending and power and celebrating human rights and freedom of speech in ways we haven't seen for decades. Meanwhile, both Canada and Australia have both recently had general elections, and both have chosen the other path, returning to power the incumbent parties who are largely responsible for their own economic woes and loss of freedom over the last few decades. The UK, well, the birthplace of freedom in the English-speaking world, they have a very unclear future. Their federal government under Prime Minister Keir Starmer is as bad as it is in Canada or Australia, but the recent local elections in the UK offered a rare bright spark of hope in the form of the Reform Party surging to the very front. It appears that all may not yet be lost in the UK, at least not in the same way as it might be elsewhere in the world. Meanwhile, in non-English-speaking mainland Europe, we've seen a spate of dirty tactics being used to suppress the will of the voting public. Romania, for example, cancelled their own elections in December last year, annulling the victory of Calin Georgescu, citing Russian interference as the reason. But Russia from the left is now just a dog whistle for "we weren't winning." Elections in Romania are now going ahead as we speak, and at least at the time of recording this, the so-called far-right candidate George Simion is doing well, even though Calin Georgescu remains banned from running, despite his overwhelming popularity. So much for the democratic will of the people. I'll keep an eye on Romania as it plays out. In France, we've seen embezzlement charges brought against Marine Le Pen in scenes reminiscent of the dirty tricks and double standards used in the lawsuits against Donald Trump. Le Pen was found guilty. She's appealing. But even assuming that the ruling is correct, what she's accused of doing is essentially a European version of the Victorian red shirts scandal. She is, for the moment, banned from running in the 2027 general elections, but just like in Romania where they banned Georgescu only to see his replacement Simion take the lead, it is likely that if she cannot run in 2027, then Jordan Bardella will run in her place and likely enjoy increased support due to the attacks against Le Pen rather than decreased. In Germany, they have designated their most popular political party as an extremist organisation and are now debating an outright ban. In a democratic country, it's supposed to be up to the people to decide what is extreme and what is not. But now, self-styled leftist elites are presuming to be able to decide that for the people, and to deny the people the choices which these elites deem to be unacceptable in their elite exclusive opinion. So that's mainland Europe, where left-wing elites are having to actively shut down a populist uprising, a pro-freedom uprising, which contrasts sharply with Australia and Canada, where the people elected hard-lined, left-wing, anti-freedom governments. And in the UK, we have a halfway in between, with a dominant left-wing government being trounced in those local elections by the fledgling Reform Party, which, at least at the time of recording this, hasn't been outlawed yet. That is quite a spread. And the question is, why the difference? Why is freedom on a resurgence in mainland Europe whilst it's on the back foot in Australia and Canada, and somewhere in between in the UK? What can we learn about these differences, and what should we do from here to maximise the chances of freedom winning out in our part of the world? My name is Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around us. Now, I am 100% viewer supported, so if you find content like this thought-provoking, then please support my work by heading over to goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com and checking out my books, my award-winning DVDs, my t-shirts, and my hoodies, and you'll be helping me to keep doing what I do. With the dust settling from the Australian elections, the trend in the Commonwealth countries could not be clearer. We are choosing to renew our chains in Canada and Australia, even while mainland Europe is trying to throw off their chains. Now, many are quick to blame Trump for the election disasters in Australia and Canada, claiming that Peter Dutton and Pierre Poilievre were too Trump-like and lost popular support because of a public backlash against their Trump-likeness. But that is much too simple, and it fails to explain why the UK is going more the way of mainland Europe rather than the way of Australia and Canada, despite arguably the UK having borne the brunt of the Trump effect, with humiliating White House confrontations where US Vice President J.D. Vance called out the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer for not defending freedom of speech, with no special treatment on tariffs despite Starmer's optimism, following a summit with President Trump, with starkly contrasting visions between America and the UK for the war in Ukraine, and just last night, news that a so-called trade deal has been reached, in which the 10% tariffs from the US against the UK will remain in place on most imports. What's different in the UK to cause the Trump effect, which has hurt the UK so much more, to actually be a positive thing for the Reform Party electorally? The Reform Party, of course, being the party that is most associated with Trump, where the Trump effect was apparently such a negative thing in Canada and Australia. And why in the rest of Europe do we see Trumpian politics so popular that left-wing governments are having to shut them down by hook or by crook? The difference, in my opinion, isn't actually in the voters, it's in the respective candidates. Dutton and Poilievre are cowards who are afraid of the Trump label, whereas Nigel Farage and the Reform Party are very willing to play the part of the villain in the media and are, relatively speaking, fearless about defending their values and what they stand for. The same is true for candidates in Germany, France, and in Romania. They know what they believe, and they speak out for it, regardless of the labels and attacks that will come against them in the partisan media. I am convinced that both Canada and Australia could have enjoyed very different outcomes in our elections if only our respective candidates had possessed even a fraction of the courage of a Donald Trump or a Marine Le Pen or any of these other European candidates that we're seeing do so well. People won't believe in someone who doesn't believe in something. Only by showing that you are willing to pay a price for what you believe can you prove that you really believe it. When Dutton and Poilievre cowered away from the Trump-like label, they showed themselves to be empty suits, believers in nothing. And right around the world, one of the most universal democratic truths is that people want to believe in someone who believes in something. And that belief, that confidence, is attractive to voters, whether what that candidate believes is right or wrong. Now, we can argue about whether that's how it should be. Politics shouldn't be just a confidence game about who believes in their policies more. Well, sure, you can say that's not how it should be, but that's a pointless debate to have because that is how it is. It's baked into human nature. Swinging voters will gravitate towards whichever candidate actually believes in something the most. So when you have a situation like Australia where we had Prime Minister Albanese who stood firm on his socialist beliefs, proclaimed his policies proudly despite their absurd price tags and their dubious effectiveness, he believed in the nonsense he was saying. But on the other side, you had Peter Dutton, who was easily flummoxed, struggled to articulate any of his beliefs, betrayed his values relentlessly in an effort to be liked by the voters, and cowered in fear of the Trump-like label. When it's between those two, the candidate with passion, fire in his belly, and an actual belief in his own policies will win every single time. And that's true whether the candidate is right or wrong, wise or clueless. Voters want to believe in someone who believes in something. And that is where both Dutton and Poilievre fell down. They were afraid to directly articulate what they believed for fear of that dreaded Trump label. So in the end, they gave their people nothing worth voting for. The results in Australia and Canada are now being trumpeted as proof that Donald Trump is on the nose. The world is rejecting Trumpian politics. But actually, they're proof that weakness is on the nose, and the world is rejecting visionless, empty suits who are more worried about seeming virtuous in the media than actually doing good for their constituents. And that is what makes the situation in mainland Europe, and especially also in the UK, different. Now, the UK local elections are of course not the same as a general election, but the results were historic and telling nevertheless. Nigel Farage and the Reform Party believe in something, and when they're attacked, they stick up for it instead of apologising, and that is why the UK public are gravitating towards them in such large numbers, making them the largest single party in these most recent local elections. Now, the next UK general election is still some years away, and if the Reform Party are going to carry that momentum and not stumble the way that others have, then they need to take the right lessons away from their recent successful local election results. Stand up for what you believe, especially when you get attacked. Don't back down. Don't apologize. Don't shift your stance in the hope of making yourself more palatable to the media class and the left-wing intelligentsia, who will never vote for you, by the way, no matter what you do. The people want someone to believe in, and that means that someone must first and foremost believe in themselves. Now, I started this report by saying that the English-speaking world is dividing, and I'll finish this video by finishing that point. It is dividing along a very simple fault line. Those that still believe in themselves on the one side, principally the United States of America, and those that no longer believe in anything and certainly no longer believe in freedom, those being Canada and Australia. For the UK, that choice has not yet been made, but the lessons for the Reform Party coming out of Australia and Canada are simple. Give your people someone to believe in and watch them flock to you. Compromise, and you will share in the failures of Dutton and Polyev. And as for the rest of mainland Europe, well, these are dangerous times indeed, with totalitarian outlawing of parties and candidates using whatever means necessary. But in truth, all of these left-wing powers, the governments, and what they're doing, all they're doing is proving that these so-called extremist far-right candidates actually believe in what they're saying, because they're proving that those candidates are willing to pay a price for what they're saying. And if I'm right, then that means that by persecuting these extremist parties, they will become more popular and not less. We have some interesting times ahead. My name is Topher Field. This is the Topher Project. I am 100% viewer supported, so head over to Good People Break Bad Laws and check out my books. Good People Break Bad Laws, about civil disobedience in the modern age. Good Christians Break Bad Laws, which is the theology of civil disobedience. The DVD of my multi-award-winning, internationally acclaimed documentary Battleground Melbourne, along with my t-shirts and my hoodies. Thank you so much for your support and helping me to keep doing what I do. Please like, comment, share, check out this recommended video from YouTube, and as always, stay free.